Welcome back to Crime Story with Camila. Today we talk about a chilling story of the confessions of corruption, the priest who fooled an entire parish. Stay tuned as we delve in the interesting story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thought about this mystery. In this quiet, close-knit community, trust was a currency that flowed freely. At the center of it all was Father John, a charismatic and seemingly devoted priest who had become a spiritual guide, confidant, and pillar of hope for his parishioners. But behind the facade of kindness and faith lay a web of secrets that would shatter this idyllic image forever. Father John was more than just a priest. To his congregation, he was a man of God, a moral compass in turbulent times. People trusted him with their deepest fears, their sins, and their hard-earned donations to keep the church alive. Little did they know, their trust would soon be betrayed in ways they could never imagine. This is the story of how one man, cloaked in the sanctity of religion, manipulated an entire parish. A tale of greed, betrayal, and broken faith, the confessions of corruption that no one saw coming. Father John was the heartbeat of the parish. His sermons were known to stir emotions and inspire faith, leaving his congregation feeling deeply connected to both God and one another. To his parishioners, he wasn't just their priest, he was a friend, a guide, and the embodiment of trust and holiness. Some parishioners said some nice words about Father John. One parishioner said, "Father John has a way of making you feel like you're the only one in the room. He's always there when you need him, whether it's for advice or just a shoulder to lean on." While the other parishioner also said, "I've never met anyone as dedicated as Father John. He doesn't just preach, he practices what he preaches. He's an example for all of us." Father John's generosity knew no bounds. Whether it was raising funds for the church's upkeep, helping families in need, or organizing community events, he went above and beyond to ensure everyone felt supported. To many, he was more than a man, he was a living symbol of faith and compassion. But as with every bright light, shadows linger. And in Father John's case, the shadows would soon grow darker than anyone could have imagined. It started subtly, small amounts of money missing from the church's donation fund. At first, the irregularities were dismissed as simple bookkeeping errors. After all, this was Father John, a man of God, who would dare question his integrities. But as time passed, whispers began to circulate. Father John, once known for his humility, seemed to have developed a taste for the finer things in life. A new car, designer clothes, and frequent trips to religious conferences, all paid for with funds that didn't quite add up. Some members of the congregation started asking questions. Why was the church suddenly struggling financially? Why were donation drives becoming more frequent, yet the promised renovations to the church never materialized? The answers were always vague, with Father John assuring them that the money was being used for important matters. Father John's charisma worked in his favor. He dismissed concerns with ease, reminding everyone of the good work the church was doing. And for a while, people believed him. After all, how could a man so devoted to God be capable of deceit? But for those who looked closer, the signs were there. Small cracks in the perfect image he had built. Cracks that would soon grow into a scandal too big to contain. Father John, once known for his warmth and approachability, began to change. He no longer lingered after services to chat with parishioners or offer words of comfort. Instead, he seemed distant, preoccupied, and at times, defensive when questioned. When questions about the church's financial health were raised during council meetings, Father John's responses became uncharacteristically defensive. What was once a collaborative space became tense, as he insisted that everything was under control and that no one had the right to question his decisions. Members of the parish began to notice strange behavior. Father John was often seen leaving the church late at night, carrying boxes and envelopes. Rumors started to swirl. What was he hiding? As whispers of doubt spread through the congregation, parishioners began connecting the dots. The man they once trusted unconditionally now seemed to be hiding something that could unravel everything they believed about him. The seeds of suspicion had been planted. What had once been unwavering trust was now tainted with doubt. And soon, those doubts would give way to revelations that would leave the parish reeling. Mrs. Clara was a lifelong member of the parish, known for her dedication and unwavering faith. While tidying up the church office, she stumbled upon something she was never meant to see. Documents that would shatter her trust in the man she had admired for years. The receipts painted a damning picture, lavish expenses that no ordinary priest could justify. But what truly shocked Mrs. Clara were the printed emails, messages that hinted at personal indulgences and a life far removed from the vows of poverty and humility Father John had taken. Mrs. Clara's heart raced as she realized the gravity of what she had uncovered. Should she confront Father John? Should she tell someone? The weight of her discovery was almost too much to bear, knowing it could destroy not only Father John but also the faith of the entire parish. Unable to carry the burden alone, Mrs. Clara confided in 3 trusted friends. Together, they pored over the evidence, piecing together a story of betrayal and deception. What began as whispers of doubt was now a full-blown investigation. The truth was out there, waiting to be revealed. And once it was, the parish would never be the same again. The walls were closing in. The small group of parishioners who had discovered the truth knew they had to act. But how? Confronting Father John was a daunting task. What if they were wrong? What if they couldn't prove anything? But the pieces of the puzzle were too large to ignore, and each new discovery deepened their conviction. Father John, once the calm and composed leader, was now showing signs of paranoia. Every creak of the church floor seemed amplified. Every shadow felt like a threat. He could feel the walls closing in, but he remained unaware of just how close the truth was to being exposed. Whispers of doubt grew louder with each passing day. Some parishioners, eager to protect their beloved priest, dismissed the rumors. Others, however, felt the weight of suspicion grow heavier. The balance was shifting, and Father John's grip on the community was beginning to slip. The moment of truth had arrived. With the evidence laid bare before him, Father John's calm facade began to crack. He denied everything, claiming the allegations were baseless, but his nervous demeanor spoke volumes. He had nowhere to hide now. It was a standoff, a battle of words and accusations. But with every lie Father John told, the weight of his deception grew heavier, pushing the parish closer to an explosive revelation. What would be the cost of the truth? How far would Father John go to protect his secrets? And more importantly, would the parish ever recover from the fallout? The time had come. Mrs. Clara and the other parishioners had gathered every shred of evidence they could find. Each document, each email, a silent witness to the betrayal. They were ready to confront the man who had once been their shepherd. But now, he was no more than a deceiver who had misused the trust of his flock. Father John responded, "What's all this about? I told you, this is all a misunderstanding. There's nothing to see here." Mrs. Clara steps forward, her voice steady but firm. She places the stack of evidence on the desk, her hands shaking slightly as she does. The weight of the documents seems to hang in the air like a heavy cloud. Mrs. Clara said, "It's not a misunderstanding, Father. We've seen the receipts, the emails, the financial statements. You've been using the church's funds for personal gain. You've lied to us all." Father John defensively responded, "I've done everything for this church. You think I would steal from my own parish? You don't understand. Everything I've done was for the greater good, for the future of this place. You have no idea what it takes to run a church." The words were hollow, and the priest's once invincible facade of confidence was beginning to crack. Every accusation he deflected only dug him deeper into the hole he had created. His efforts to salvage his image were futile, and the weight of his lies was crushing him. Ally once said, "How could you justify spending thousands on yourself, Father? You knew there were families struggling, people in need right here, in our own parish. And yet, you took from us, you took from the church." Father John responded, "I did what I had to do. This church was falling apart, and you all wouldn't understand the pressure I was under. I had to maintain an image. There were people relying on me, on us. I did it for the good of the parish." Father John's words faltered, his deflections now ringing hollow. The faces of those who had trusted him were filled with betrayal, their eyes searching for answers he could no longer provide. The charismatic priest, once revered, was now exposed as a liar. Father John said, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Mrs. Clara responded, "It's too late for apologies, Father. The truth is out." For the first time, Father John was confronted not with the power of his position, but with the weight of his own choices. And in that moment, he understood that there was no going back. The priest he had once been was gone. What began as a quiet confrontation in the priest's office quickly spiraled beyond the walls of the church. Word spread faster than they could have imagined, and with it, the undeniable truth. The people who had trusted Father John the most were now faced with an excruciating reality. Their shepherd had led them astray. One of the parishioner, whispering, trembling, He took money from us? From the church?" The other parishioner angrily said, "I can't believe it. We trusted him with everything." Mrs. Clara said, "We can't let him get away with this. The community needs to know the truth, no matter how painful." As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the full scale of Father John's deception became clear. His lies were no longer contained to the walls of his office. They had now affected every soul in the parish, every person who had ever believed in him. For Father John, the truth had begun to seep into every corner of his life. Once a revered figure in the community, he was now a man shunned, his reputation in tatters. Even as he stood before his congregation, his voice was no longer a symbol of authority. It was the weak sound of a man trying to maintain control over something he had already lost. Father John, voice wavering, speaking to the people, "I know there have been misunderstandings, but we must stay united. We must keep our faith strong." Another parishioner said, under her breath, to the person next to her, "How can we stay united when he's lied to all of us?" Father John, desperately, said to the parishioners, "Please, I beg for your forgiveness. The truth you're hearing, it's not what it seems. I never intended to hurt anyone." But the words fell flat. No amount of pleading could undo the damage he had caused. The trust that once bound him to his congregation had been completely shattered. No longer was he the trusted priest. He was now the man who had turned his back on the very people who had lifted him up. In that moment, the church was no longer a place of sanctuary. It was a battleground where trust had been lost, and no amount of regret could ever restore what had been stolen. The unraveling of Father John's lies had only just begun. As the parishioners arrived for the service, they were met with an unsettling silence. Father John, once a constant presence at the altar, had vanished without a trace. His disappearance sent a wave of confusion and panic through the community. Parishioners said, concerned, speaking to another, "Where is Father John? He's never late. This isn't like him." Another parishioner said, nervously, "I don't know. Do you think he's running?" As the hours passed, the truth became clearer. Father John was not just absent, he had fled. The man who had once commanded so much respect and trust was now a fugitive, attempting to escape the consequences of his greed and deceit. In the dead of night, Father John had made his escape. His face, once the face of a trusted leader, was now a shadow of guilt. He had abandoned his flock, his home, and his position, all for one thing: to outrun the truth he could no longer escape. Father John said in the car, speaking to himself, "I didn't ask for this. I had no choice." But choices had been made. And now, Father John's attempt to escape would only be the beginning of his downfall. Father John's escape left a gaping hole in the heart of the parish. The once tightly knit community, built on trust and faith, now stood on shaky ground. The revelation of his betrayal was not just an offense against one person, but an assault on the very foundation of the church itself. Visuals. Shots of parishioners standing in front of the church, some shaking their heads, others whispering to one another. The camera lingers on a few faces, capturing the raw emotion, grief, disbelief, and the weight of the betrayal. One parishioner said softly to a friend, "I can't believe it. All these years, we thought he was one of us. How could he do this to us?" Another parishioner, nodding, tearing up, "I don't know how we'll move forward from this. It feels like everything has been a lie." The parishioners, though devastated, slowly began to pick up the pieces. They realized that while Father John had betrayed their trust, the foundation of their community remained in the hearts of the people who had supported one, encouraging their fellow parishioners to lean on each other and find strength in their shared faith. For years, Mrs. Clara, speaking softly but firmly, "We will not let this break us. Our faith is not in one man. It's in each other, and it's in the community we've built together." In the face of betrayal, the parish found something they hadn't expected: resilience. Father John had taken their trust, but he had not taken their spirit. As they lit their candles, they began the long road to healing, a road that would lead them back to one another. Parishioner, reflecting as they light a candle, "We may have lost someone we trusted, but we haven't lost our faith." And so, the parish moved forward. The betrayal would always linger, but in its wake, a new strength was born, a strength that would carry them through whatever came next. As the parishioners began to uncover the truth, Father John's fate was sealed. He fled in the dead of night, his face no longer the face of a trusted leader, but of a man running from the very people who once adored him. Father John, to himself, muttering, "It's not too late. I can start over. They'll never catch me." But the life of a fugitive was not the freedom Father John had imagined. Constantly looking over his shoulder, he found himself trapped in his own fear. What had once seemed like an escape now felt like a prison. Father John, speaking quietly, as he checks the door once again, "They'll find me. I know they will." The isolation gnawed at him. Each passing day, Father John's mind began to unravel. The weight of his crimes hung over him like a dark cloud. He was alone, with only his conscience to torment him. Father John, to the stranger, voice trembling, "What do you want?" Stranger, casually, "Just wanted to see if you needed anything, sir." Father John responded, "No, I'm fine. Just leave me alone." The further he ran, the closer his past caught up with him. Each mile he put between himself and the parish seemed to bring him no closer to peace. He could hear the voices of those he betrayed, echoing in his mind. And no matter how far he ran, he knew he could never outrun the truth. Father John to himself, in a whispered panic. I never wanted it to end like this. What have I done? Father John, the man who once commanded respect, had become a prisoner of his own making. With every passing day, the realization grew stronger. There was no running from the man he had become. Father John, whispering, eyes wide in fear. They're coming, they'll find me. I can't keep running. In his flight, Father John's life became a series of motels and borrowed identities. Once a figure of authority, he now lived like a fugitive, constantly moving, always on edge. Every place was temporary, every face a potential threat. Father John, muttering to himself, with anxiety in his voice, they're out there. I know it. They're looking for me. With every new town, he created a new persona. Father John, the priest, was no more. In his place was a man with no name, no future, just a shadow of what he once was. Silence had become his closest companion. In the loneliness of his new life, Father John found no comfort, only the echoes of his past decisions. No amount of distance could silence the screams of guilt that rang louder with each passing day. Father John to himself, barely audible. I thought I could run, but I can't. I can't escape what I did. The deeper Father John fell into hiding, the tighter the grip of fear held him. Every unfamiliar sound, every face in a crowd felt like a threat. He had once lived in the light, but now, every corner seemed shrouded in darkness. Father John to himself, voice trembling, it's him, no. It can't be. Just breathe. Keep walking. As his body deteriorated, so did his mind. The alcohol was a temporary escape, but it only brought fleeting relief. The memories of the parish, of the lies and the betrayal, haunted him every waking moment. His conscience would not let him rest. Father John, muttering under his breath, staring at the bottle. I don't deserve peace. I deserve this, don't I? I don't deserve peace. I deserve this, don't I? At first, it was a small flicker of doubt, a passing thought that perhaps no one would recognize him. But as days passed, that seed of uncertainty grew, twisting into a deep-rooted fear. Father John began to see threats in every shadow, every passing face. Father John to himself, his voice shaky, are they here? Are they coming for me? Every stranger was a potential threat. Every face in the crowd could be someone who knew him, someone who would lead the authorities right to his door. The world, once familiar, had become a maze of dangers, real and imagined. Father John, whispering to himself, no, it's nothing. Just calm down. Every whispered word, every chance conversation felt like a dagger in his heart. His life on the run had become a nightmare, each passing day filled with the dread of discovery. Stranger said, loudly, to the other stranger, you hear about that priest? They say he took off right after the truth came out. Poor folks over at the parish, they didn't know what hit them. Father John to himself, panicking, no, they know. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was always a step behind him. The walls were closing in, and no matter how many times he changed his path, he couldn't escape the growing suspicion that he was never truly alone. Father John whispering, voice cracking, I'm not alone. I know they're here. In those moments, every sound was amplified. His every step, his every breath was a risk. And with each near encounter, the fear grew stronger. The world had become a place of constant tension, a place where escape was nothing more than a fleeting illusion. Father John, voice trembling, muttering to himself, it's only a matter of time. They'll find me. Father John had once been a man of purpose, a man who commanded respect and admiration. But now, he was a man broken by his own lies. The weight of his betrayal had become too much to bear, unraveling him piece by piece. His mind, once sharp and focused, was now clouded with guilt and the fear of being caught. Every passing moment felt like an eternity of torment. Father John, whispering to himself, voice cracked and low, I've lost everything. Everything I ever stood for. Father John, muttering to himself, voice trembling, they're coming. I can feel it. I'm not safe anymore. In the silence of his hiding, Father John could no longer escape the truth. His guilt had consumed him. The priest, who had once found solace in his faith, now found only chaos in his own mind. Every creak of a floorboard, every distant siren, was a reminder of the truth that he had buried deep inside. He had fooled the world, but now he couldn't fool himself. Father John softly, almost inaudible, I can't escape. I can't outrun it. In this moment of stillness, as the world moved on without him, Father John was forced to confront the haunting weight of his choices. Surrounded by life, he was reminded of all that he had lost, his position, his community, and most of all, his soul. Father John softly, to himself, I was supposed to protect them, but I betrayed them all. Father John's reflection was a quiet one. The parishioners he had once served, the trust he had shattered, and the lies he had built his life on, all of them now haunted him, endlessly. He was a man who had once given others hope, but now he could not even give himself peace. Father John, whispering to himself, almost inaudible, "I failed them. I failed me." In the end, Father John realized too late that the greatest prison he had ever built was the one inside his own heart. A prison where regret, guilt, and sorrow would keep him trapped forever. Father John had spent months hiding, carefully avoiding any attention. But fate, as it often does, had a final twist in store for him. The phone rang, an unexpected call that would signal the end of his self-imposed exile. Father John, whispering, voice shaking, "Hello." On the other end of the line, the voice was clear and cold, official, without a hint of sympathy. It was the authorities. After months of hiding in plain sight, the inevitable had finally come. Father John, barely able to speak, voice trembling. "No, please. I didn't mean for this." It was too late for apologies. The law had finally caught up to Father John. His life on the run had come to an end, and with it, the final shreds of his dignity. In the end, there was no escape. Father John had spent so long running from the truth, but truth, like time, is unstoppable. His fate had been sealed the moment he betrayed those who trusted him. And so, after months of running, after years of deception, Father John's final chapter was written not in a place of faith, but in the cold walls of a courtroom. A man who had once stood at the altar, guiding others, was now faced with the consequences of his actions. Father John's betrayal was not just of his congregation, but of himself. In the end, there would be no redemption, no second chance. His story had come to its painful conclusion. Sometimes, the greatest lesson comes not from the pulpit, but from the fall of those who once stood upon it. Father John's story is a tragic reminder that even the most trusted can fall, and when they do, they take everything with them.
Thanks for watching. For more interesting videos, please subscribe.